Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session focusing on the future. My name is Ignas Žilinskas, and I'm representing publishing house Šviesa. So, first of all, thank you for taking your time out and joining us today. I believe that we live in quite different times right now, when teachers have to defend themselves amidst the pandemic consequences. And I know that some of you may have already returned to face-to-face classes, but most of the teachers are still working remotely. This is why I'm really glad to announce that we managed to find a perfect partner for publishing house Šviesa, which is Pearson Education. They invest a lot in printed and digital materials, so I believe that the textbook courses will help you a lot when you have to adapt to constantly changing situation in our education. Iveta Vitova, a representative of Pearson Education, has also joined us today. And after Phil's, our trainer's presentation, she will also reach out to you and show the main benefits of Focus Second Edition. At the end of the event, we will have a quick Q&A session as well. So I encourage you to write questions in the chat box next to the broadcast, which I will read out loud to our trainer Phil in the very end of the event. Also, please check all of the information in the chat box, because there will be some information about how to get those certificates that will be useful for getting a higher teacher qualification, right? And now I would like to introduce today's presenter, today's trainer, Phil Warwick. He's a true professional in the field of education. He's been delivering teacher training courses in more than 30 countries. He's also currently working at school in one of the Czech schools. So I'm pretty sure that he will be able to share not only theoretical background to some of the things, but some practical advices as well. So we'd love to hear from you, Phil, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ignas. Good afternoon, people. I'm calling you from sunny Brno, the second city in Czechia. It's been an interesting year for me. I mean, how's your year been? I'd like to sort of start with a little recap, a little timeline. I've been to Lithuania before, a few years ago, when I was doing some training for Pearson. Primarily for the last, actually, this was quite frightening. 2021, I realized I'm entering my 5th decade of English language teaching, because I first started teaching in '89. So I did the 80s, the 90s, the noughties, yeah, the last decade, and now this decade. And I'm beginning to feel a little bit old. But it's interesting, because just before the pandemic in February 2020, I was in Milan. I had my training schedule for various countries in Europe that I was going to visit. They were all sort of cancelled. I also work for a language school, or a set of language schools in the UK and Malta. We run summer courses for students. I was put on furlough, which means that I got 80% of my salary, but I wasn't allowed to work in March. And I started getting very, very bored. So I couldn't travel anywhere. All my teacher training was cancelled. I'd set myself a goal at the beginning of the year. I realized that I'd done a lot of teacher training and a lot of academic management, but I hadn't really done much teaching. And a dear friend of mine, who's a teacher trainer here in Brno, mentioned around about May, this time last year, she said, "You don't know anyone who wants to work in a secondary school, do you?" And I thought, well, that'll be me. You know, I was getting by on webinars and the furlough pay, but I was getting a little bored. So in August, I started work in a secondary school here in Brno. And we were doing in-person teaching. and the students were great. But round about October, we started to get students who were testing positive for the virus. So we had a little bit of hybrid teaching, where some of the students were in class, some of the students were sent home. Then we had a system where 1 week, one class would be face-to-face, and one week the other class would be remote. But basically from the end of October, it's been distance learning. And it's been distance learning. We came back to school for, I think, 10 days in December. But since really this week, it's been pretty much distance learning. This week on Monday, we were actually back in class, and this morning I was teaching my students again in class, which was great. But really, with the way things are going, who knows what the future will hold? I certainly have become a different teacher to the teacher I was a year ago, through being involved in all the different types of teaching I've done. So I'd like to share with you a little bit of what I've learned from my experience at secondary school and my experience during the pandemic. What sort of things have stood out? Well, I teach primarily older secondary students. So I'd say I teach 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. And one of the things I've found, I've rediscovered, if you like, is teaching is a great profession when your students are motivated. And I have to say, I've been very lucky with my students. They, even throughout the pandemic and throughout all the teething problems that technology and good internet access can have, I've had students who want to learn, and that's been really rewarding. Some students actually really enjoy studying from home rather than going to school. Our secondary school has a good reputation, so we have a lot of students that actually move into dormitories for the week. They live quite a way away, so they have to leave home and come in to study. Initially, when things started to happen, students missed their classmates rather than the lessons. They missed the sort of peer interaction. But then after a few months, you could see that they'd start missing the lessons too. They missed, certainly for subjects like chemistry, where you were encouraged to have practical things, they started missing the lessons. I also discovered that teenage students studying from bedrooms, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning, don't like using cameras. And I don't mind if they don't use their cameras, because I don't particularly want to see teenage bedrooms and teenage students in pajamas. So I was quite happy with that. My colleagues, the other teachers, seem to give a lot more homework when the teaching became distance learning. So there was a lot of homework for the students to get through. A lot of my colleagues used online tests to make up the classes. So there was an awful lot of testing. In fact, the whole Czech Republic has banned testing for a week for the first week back for students in secondary schools, because the feedback from students has been there's just been too much homework and too much assessment. 21st century skills, they got dumped very quickly to be replaced with exercises and accuracy tests. One or two apps, things like Kahoot and Quizlet, got used a little bit too frequently, so the students started getting bored with them. The final year students, around about November, started panicking about the school leaving exams and were worried that they didn't have the right preparation for them. Everything gets boring after a while. There's only so many times you can do the same thing in Zoom before your students and yourself it begins to feel a bit too repetitive. Autonomy is really important, especially when you're doing asynchronous learning. That means when you're giving work for the students to do between lessons, not homework, but project work might replace a conventional lesson time slot. And students weren't very good at learning autonomously. They needed guidance and help. So part of what we're going to talk about today is how to make students more autonomous. And then I noticed last week and this week, not that many students are happy to go back to in-person teaching. Everything is habit forming. And the very fact that we've had students having distance learning for so long, pretty much non-stop apart from a week in December, they were all a little bit anxious. They weren't too happy. They sorted out a routine that worked for them. They had the IT equipment. So being forced to actually appear in class, it hasn't all been positive this week in terms of the student reactions. So let's look at what we've been doing. And I think teachers in Lithuania are no different from teachers in the Czech Republic. We've had to get our heads around this hybrid learning, which is basically moving students from face-to-face to online learning with no change to the syllabus. So it means that there's a difference between blended learning, where perhaps you have some elements that are planned for digital and online presence, and some elements that are planned for face-to-face learning. Hybrid learning, it's a little bit harder to plan because you're dealing with things on the fly. You're having to react very quickly to certain things. So I've done synchronous learning. I've done asynchronous learning. And of course, you know, a lot of what I've been doing has been a little bit different from blended learning, because as I mentioned, blending learning is about applying distance learning with in-class teaching, whereas hybrid learning is about finding the best approach regardless of the medium. Let's look at blended learning for a second. I'm sure you can identify with this. This is the famous diagram from the Christensen Institute that talks about the 4 models of blended learning. One is the rotation model, where students rotate through a variety of activities, and some of the activities involve using online apps like Kahoot, or online platforms like Moodle or My English Lab. You've got a flipped classroom model, where perhaps the content is delivered online and the practice is done in class. And of course, you've got a differentiation model, and that might have been going for some time if you've got students with special needs or students who can't attend face-to-face learning. So you've got the rotation model. You've got the flex model, which is like flipped learning. Basic content is delivered online, but a different focus is given to different learners in class. You got the self-blend model, which is a sort of menu-driven approach where it's a negotiated syllabus between the teacher and the students, and they decide what's done online and what's done in class. And you got this enriched virtual model where, I don't know if you've heard of Open University, which is basically the old correspondence courses for people to get a university degree in the UK without studying full-time. This enriched learning is primarily online with a little bit, and in the case of the Open University, I think it's 2 weeks where the students get together. So blended learning is something that we've all become very adept at over the last year or so. Let's have a little look at our students though. I mean, secondary school students, there's this old quote: we have 21st century students taught by 20th century teachers using 19th century methods, sometimes in 18th century buildings. We're teaching teenagers, they're digital residents, they feel comfortable online, they have an online presence, but they're teenagers. So their hormones are all over the place, they're growing very quickly, they're also very self-conscious. I'd like to sort of spend a couple of minutes looking at teenage students and secondary education, but I want to talk PC. And by PC, I'm not talking about this type of PC, or about that type of PC, Police Constable Jones, or about this type of PC, politically correct, or as a percentage, I'm one of that 6%, by the way. I'm talking about this PC. The world was very different PC, pre-COVID. And trying to find the latest research pre-COVID. This is sort of research that came out, I suppose, the pandemic hit in February. I managed to find something that came out in January of last year, so just before the pandemic and not affected by the pandemic. This was the headline in the Guardian newspaper. Schools are boring and irrelevant, say teenagers. And when I dived into this research came from Yale University, one of the Ivy League universities in America. And they did 2 experiments. One experiment was a survey of 21,678 high school students. And the other survey was a lot smaller with 472 high school students just in Connecticut. So let's look at these 2 surveys and the results that they found. In the first survey, it was very much a question of asking students to think about how they felt at school. Think about the range of positive and negative feelings you have in school and write in 3 boxes how you feel. So they were looking for 3 feelings and the students could write anything they wanted to. And then they were also asked to rate on a scale of 0 to 100 how they felt about 10 specific emotions. And these were the 10: happy, proud, cheerful, joyful, lively, sad, mad, miserable, afraid, scared, stressed, and bored. What they found was that basically in the open-ended responses, the most common emotion was tired. Over half the students, when asked to choose any emotion they felt, opted for tired. And then the next most reported emotions, all just under 50%, were stressed, bored, calm, and happy. Okay, a couple of negative ones, a couple of positive ones, but those positive ones are pretty passive. And the rating scale supported the finding, with students reported feeling stressed and bored the most. So I think this sort of goes to show in this first stage that actually we didn't have a wonderful secondary education system, a global education system before the pandemic. Here was the smaller sample. And in the second stage of the experiment, when they were just looking at Connecticut, they had experience sampling. So they asked the students to how they felt at certain times of the day, just before their first lesson, just after lunch, just before they finished school. And again, these momentary assessments told the same story. High school students reported emotions, negative feelings 60% of the time. So I think there's a lot that was wrong with education. Certainly there's a lot wrong with the English education system at secondary and a lot wrong with the Czech education system. We've gone through probably the most life-changing event that any of us have experienced. And I'd like to look at this chap. I'm sure you recognize the caricature. This is Charles Darwin. And here is his quote: "In times of massive upheaval, it is not the strongest or the most intelligent that survive. It is those that are most adaptable to change that continue to thrive." And I think if we, there's a saying, a good teacher never stops learning. And I think if we can really embrace the positives from our own and our students' learning experiences over the last 12 months, we can really help develop and change what we're doing with our students in class. One of the things that might be worth considering, and I think I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this, is how the world is changing. People say that we're in the middle of the 4th industrial revolution. This is the revolution of things. This is where fridges talk to shops. And as we become more automated and artificial intelligence becomes more prominent and adept at processing simple sort of productive types of roles, employers are beginning to look for different skills. And I've got a couple of things that might interest you. This is from the World Economic Forum. I've got results from 2015 and last year. The results for this year aren't out yet. But in 2015, these were the 10 most sought for attributes, skills that employers were looking for from employees. And if you look in 2015, there are some interesting things here. These are sort of human skills. These are the sort of things that they don't think can be replaced by machines. And if we look at last year, we can see that things like emotional intelligence have suddenly appeared. Critical thinking and creativity has shot up from 10th place to 3rd place. So you can see that really we have an education system, certainly if the Lithuanian one is anything like the Czech or English one, we have an education system which is primarily bent on assessment, memorization, and training students to be good producers. We live in a world where actually we really want to educate students not to be the same, but to accentuate the differences and to concentrate on the importance of being human. I'm sure you all know Jack Ma, who used to own the Chinese Amazon site, Alibaba. And he gave a big speech last year at the World Economic Forum where he said, we shouldn't be teaching students content-based subjects, which involve a lot of memorization. We should be teaching students skills-based subjects like music or art or language, where they have the opportunity to be creative and to concentrate on the things that are going to make them employable in the future. So we know, I mean, we're over 20% of the way through the 21st century. I'm sure you've all seen this before. This is the framework for how we should be teaching our students now. I think the 4 C's in terms of language teaching have very much become a mantra in terms of our classes. Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. But it's important not to forget that this is just one component. Other components, when I was a student at primary and secondary, basic literacy, the 3 R's, were important. Being able to read, write, and do basic arithmetic. That was the primary goal of primary education. Nowadays, we need to also make sure that the students are globally aware, that they have some sort of civic literacy, that they have some health literacy and environmental literacy, and also financial, economic, and business literacy. So it's not enough to have basic literacy. We need to expand it. We also need to make sure that they have life and career skills that make them flexible and adaptable, that allow them to show initiative and self-direction, and because they work in a global marketplace, be able to cross the cultural divide quite easily, and also be accountable and productive, and show leadership and responsibility. As I'm showing you these life skills, reflect on how much of your lesson content is based on helping students to develop these. I'm a big one for authentic learning. So I think whatever you do in an English class isn't just going to help them improve their English. I do a lot of group work with my students because I think being able to work in a team of people is a skill that can be enhanced through doing case studies or group work in English. I also have found it's important that the students understand how to process information, not just get information, being able to spot fake news, and being able to use the normal sources and tools to explore and find information. So we need to include this 21st century learning into our practical teaching. It's just as important, I think, as the content of grammar, tenses, and everything else. And in order to do this, we need to make our students more autonomous. And in order to make them more autonomous, we have to sort of reflect and decide, what is autonomy? So have a think for a second. What does the word autonomy mean to you? Autonomous learning, historically, I think 1976 was the European Year of Languages, and Europe decided to spend money in providing resources for self-study. So a lot of libraries started appearing all over Europe. I think the British Council funded quite a few in Eastern and Central Europe. So you might have found a few British Council libraries coming up in the 80s and 90s in Vilnius or other parts of Lithuania. But it's important to sort of start with what autonomy isn't. And I think autonomy, David Little was involved in this initial tertiary education where they had lots and lots of really nice resources in university libraries. Autonomy is not a synonym for self-instruction. What they found is if you have these great research areas, they don't get a lot of uptake from university students. It's only when the lecturers say, let's use the research areas, that the students actually started using the books, or most of them. So autonomy is not limited to learning without a teacher. A teacher can very much help facilitate this. So in the classroom context, autonomy does not entail the teacher saying, look, you get on with it, and I'm going to go and read the newspaper and have a cup of coffee. On the other hand, autonomy is not something that teachers do to learners. We can facilitate it, but it's not a teaching method. And it's not an easily described single behavior. It shifts. You find students become a lot more autonomous just before an exam, for example. So it's not a steady state achieved by learners. It goes up and down. Learner autonomy is, and I think Henry Holleck, who was also part of that initial splurge, I like his bit, the ability to take charge of one's own learning. And he talked about being able to determine the objectives, being able to define the content, select methods and techniques, and monitor the procedure of acquisition, the rhythm, the time, the place, etc., and evaluating what you've acquired. Something a little bit fresher, because Henry Holleck was writing in the 80s, is by Phil Benson. And Phil Benson says, learner autonomy is a learner's capacity to take responsibility for their learning, which involves planning, the selection of material, monitoring learning, progress, and self-assessment. And again, he has 5 principles. He says, the students have to be actively involved. You need to provide choice, and you need to have a lot of resources there. And you need the students to be able to make decisions. You also need to support learners, and you need to encourage them to reflect. He also mentioned, and as I said, it's quite nice to have transferable skills. When learners succeed in developing autonomy, they not only become better learners, they also become more responsible and critical members of society. I'm going to show you. We're going to have a look at this focus book by Pearson. I'm going to show you how I use this book to make my students more autonomous, and I can show you how I can be selective with what I've got. So I've decided to take Students Book 3, which is a B1 book. I've just taken the first unit. One of the things I quite like about the book is everything is color-coded. So the students can look at the color of the page, they can look at the color of the exercises, and they know exactly what the focus of the task is, which I think is quite nice. So let's have a look. Unit 1, as you can see, we've got this wonderful topic of fashion. Everything starts with a little bit of vocabulary. There's a can-do statement there. And it starts with a show what you know. So it goes from a position of knowledge rather than a position of the unknown. And I think it's quite important, if we want our students to be autonomous, we need them to be able to identify starting points so that they can monitor improvement and they can evaluate how effective their learning process is. David Noonan was talking about there are different stages of autonomy and implementing autonomy into practical classroom teaching. He said there are 5 stages. The first one is awareness, then you have involvement, then you have intervention, then you have creation, and finally you have transcendence. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Transcendence. What this means for us practically is that at the awareness stage, learning goals are highlighted. Teenage students are far more motivated when they know why they're doing what they're doing, where the learning outcomes are clearly highlighted. Then you can move to the next stage where the students can select which outcomes they'd like to concentrate on. So there's a choice there. And then we move to the learners modifying and adapting the goals themselves. So if it's a reading exercise and the genre of reading is something that maybe it's a booklet, something they haven't done much before, they might put additional learning goals or change learning goals from the book for their own needs. And then they create their own learning goals, and eventually they take the learning outside of the classroom and they apply it to different aspects of their life. So these are the 5 stages of implementation. And as we said, it's really important that we clearly label what the learning outcomes are. And again, here with focus, we have these can-do statements on every page. We start from the known rather than the unknown. So we've got a lot of personalization. We see language as something the student should be able to use to communicate. If you notice there are, when you have a look at the books, you'll notice that there are a few bits of text that are in blue. This shows the students what type of language they're expected to use to complete the task. So if you look here at the screen, you can see a speaking task, and you've got the first couple of sentences at the level that the students are expected to use to complete describing someone they know well. So I think this is really useful. It makes it clear what the learning outcomes are. And for us as teachers, having a framework, so this is from Unit 1A. This is using the Pearson Global Scale of English, which is a scale of 10 to 90. And of course, B1 plus is between 51 and 58 on the scale. And you can go through the different skills like reading, writing, and you can see these can-do statements and at what level these can-do statements are, whether they're B1, B1 plus, those sorts of things, and which pages and which exercises from the pages. If you're more used to the Common European Framework of Reference, again, we have a correlation table between the Cambridge Main Suite examinations, also for the Pearson tests of English. So everything that's in the course, you can dissect and you can work out what the point and what the learning outcomes for each one are, which I think is really useful if you want to be selective. And if you want the students to be more autonomous, you have to give them choice and selection. With focus, you also have this word store, and the word store includes not only lots of vocabulary, it includes lots of exam tasks, similar to international exams and school leaving exams, where they can practice the vocabulary and the grammar that's been pushed out. I think being able to have this separate resource of vocabulary that is connected to each exercise helps. I mean, if they're learning English in a non-English speaking country, everything they do in a class is going to be a little bit unnatural. So why not get them to prepare for it? Why not build up their resources so they know exactly what they're doing and they can get better at it? And I think this word store really helps. I also like the way that it uses lots of different types and forms of displaying the vocabulary. And again, this helps different types of learners as well. So different types of learners will find that they prefer certain types of display model to others, and they can use that to record their own vocab as well. So whether it's a Klein or a flow chart or something along those lines, or a table, they can work out what works for them. Right, so let's have a look at how I adapt a little bit of the course content. I'd like you to spend maybe 30 seconds while I have a sip of tea looking at this picture, specifically at what the people in the picture are wearing. Have a think about that. You've got 5 seconds left. Don't worry too much about the color or just about what the items are. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I'm going to show you some shoes and accessories and some clothes. Now, which of these can you remember seeing in those pictures? Which of these were those 3 people wearing? So again, a simple task that concentrates not just on language, but concentrates on memorization as well, I think is quite useful. So you're testing different skills. Obviously, depending on the level, you might introduce and explain some of this vocab before, but as you're all English teachers, I'd expect you to know them. And again, you'd compare your answers with a classmate, and then we check and see which you found and which you didn't in terms of the clothes and the shoes and accessories. And I think this type of changing the activity slightly, so obviously in the book and with the online presentations tool, it's a very conventional match the clothes with the pictures. I can make it a little bit more challenging for higher level students by letting them look at the pictures and then getting them to guess the clothes. Again, I like to change things around a bit because I want to get the students to feel creative. And if, like me, you have a class of between 15 and 20 students, you've got some really strong students in the same class as some much weaker ones. So I like to use differentiation techniques. Now, most of my students would just do the course book quiz, where they'd look at the 8 statements and they would answer A, B, or C to those statements, and then they would look at the key to the answers. But if I had some stronger students, they're going to zoom through this exercise. I might give them this answer. And again, if you have a look at this answer, is this for someone who answered mostly A's or mostly B's or mostly C's? What would you say? If you have a look at the key, someone who's down to earth and has a carefree attitude to clothes, who feels comfortable in their own skin, is that someone who generally answered A to those 8 statements, or generally B, or generally C? Again, you notice what I'm trying to do for the higher level students, I'm trying to get them to process the information. So I often do tasks differently. The same task, they use the same material in a different way in the same classroom. So it's a little bit like spinning plates. You have to engage the highest students, you have to support the lowest students. So they're using the same material, but the learning outcomes might be a little bit different. Again, I think when we talk about teaching in the 21st century, we have to talk about lots and hots. What am I talking about with lots and hots? Well, lots, lower order thinking skills. So read the task and do the exercise. Grammar exercises where you might artificially be using a verb structure like the perfect aspect to reconstruct some sentences are lower order thinking skills. Higher order thinking skills, being able to process information, give opinions, understanding arguments, that's where a lot of the 21st century learning comes in. And I like to include quite a lot of higher learning thinking skills in my classes. So I tend to use a flipped class approach. So we have a grammar lesson, and the grammar lesson is talking about dynamic and state verbs. One of the things I quite like about Focus is we have these videos, and I'm going to show you a bit of the content input and a bit of the instruction. The videos are accessible to the students, so they can look at them outside of class.
Hello and welcome back to London TV. Today I'm visiting two sisters who are celebrating their birthday. There's nothing unusual about that, but these sisters are extraordinary. Today they're celebrating their 104th birthday. That makes them the oldest twins in England. Hello, I'm Sarah from London TV.
Hello, Sarah. Come in.
Are you the twins' brother?
Oh, no. I'm only 80. I'm one of the younger generation.
Hello, Mabel and Rose.
You need to speak louder than that, Sarah. My sisters only hear what you say if you speak loudly.
Oh, hello.
So you have context where the grammar is used in a meaningful situation that the students can understand. And then that's followed by, here's our teacher.
Hello again. In today's lesson, we will look at two types of verbs in the English language: dynamic verbs and state verbs. Most English verbs have dynamic meanings. They describe actions like visiting, getting up, or winning. Something happens. You can use dynamic verbs with both continuous or simple forms. Today, I'm visiting.
So you also have then the grammar explanation. And one of the great things about modern approaches, you have something called nano learning, which is learning in bite-sized chunks, learning of in input bits of less than 3 minutes. And so one of the things we notice about the differences between the students we were and the students that we teach are is in their working memory. Their working memory is a little bit less than it was when we were studying. They can access less information. They know fewer telephone numbers, for example. So if we have digestible bite-sized chunks, we can throw the information at them. They'll probably forget most of it, but then they can replay it, reuse it, revisit it. And if it's quick and it's accessible, this is a way that they can process the information quite quickly. And because this is content, we're no longer the sage on the stage in class. We're not explaining it ourselves in class. The students are listening to the explanation out of class, and they're trying to actively use the language in class. And we're going to facilitate, we're going to help them, we're going to correct, give them feedback. So we're going to be reacting rather than this presentation stage. So it's no longer PPP, presentation, practice, production. It's basically about moving the things around so you can flip everything on its head, and you can use that practical in-class time to get the students actually communicating. So it's nice to have those grammar videos that the students can use outside. And then the type of exercises they do inside would encourage them to personalize and to speak and to use this sort of language. Again, one of the things about having a digital textbook is if you're doing a listening, you don't have to play the listening text for all the students to hear. If the students have access to the listening text themselves, you can get them into smaller groups and you can say, right, this listening exercise, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. You can listen to the whole text twice, or you can listen to smaller parts of the text multiple times. One person is going to be in control of the audio text. The others are going to tell them what they'd like to hear. And you can actually monitor the students as they do the listening exercise and work out how they're doing it. And I think this will give you some really great formative knowledge to help you approach listenings in a different way with different students afterwards.
1.11.8.
I'm not going to play this. I'm going to go on to something else I often do with students. Again, if we have a reading text and we have, this is from the word store, we have someone talking about packing clothes for a cycling weekend. We've got a photo about hoodies, and we've got the connection between hoodies and American footballers and break dancers. And of course, they read a text to find out about the origin of the hoodie. One of the things that the last year has taught me is that technology is everywhere, and it's not always a bad thing. Being able to have students bring in technology into the classroom or have technology readily accessible, I can quite easily show them a picture of something and I can say, find out what this is, and then find out the origin of it. And they'll go off and do a little web quest. They'll put in a picture of that, or they'll put in, I might give them crop top. They might type in crop top and they might come up with enough information to give me a presentation on the history of crop tops next class. So I often give students web quests to engage them. When we talk about the grammar, as I say, I want to make that grammar in class something very communicative. So I'll make sure I like a course book with lots and lots of communicative speaking tasks, and focus in every page has a speaking task that the students can apply things practically. I also want them to take the grammar outside of the course book and get them to be creative and productive. So I quite like the fact that there are these life skills. Here we're talking about blogs.
Hello, Internet. I'm going to talk to you today about clothes. I'm not usually good with putting outfits together, so I have one pair of jeans that I wear with everything. They're black, they're skinny, and they're perfect for me. But they're so old and tatty now, I need to find some new ones. I tried to go shopping the other day, but I just couldn't find any that I liked.
So the very fact that you got access to model vlogs that the students can look at, and then you can sort of encourage them to create their own vlogs, or here you've got create a 30 to 60 second advert for a piece of clothing, and you've got steps to make this project work productive and allow the students to use technology. It brings the language to life, and it puts it in a context that students feel comfortable to work with, which I think is really nice. I also think it's really useful to review things in a personalized way. So here, the grammar that came up in Unit 1 was the present perfect simple and continuous. And of course, they're personalizing the sentences by completing those 10 to make them true for themselves, and then comparing with their partners. We've got a little bit of writing here, and again, showing what you learned. You're putting some of the vocab from describing your friend's appearance, your personality, some of your friend's interests, into a piece of writing. A friend is going to visit your city. You can also use a lot of research techniques. I'm sure you know the KWL. So before you introduce a topic, either a listening or a video or a reading, you'll get the students to write a KWL table. What do they know about the topic? What do they want to know about the topic? And what have they learned about the topic after they've been exposed to the reading text or the video? And there are lots of interesting BBC videos with focus. Again, here we've got something, what do you know about distressed jeans? And
The worldwide market for denim jeans is enormous, and one of the most popular styles is distressed jeans. Distressed jeans are made in countries like Turkey, China, the Philippines, Mexico.
So the very fact that you've got lots of different video elements that you can expose the students to, some of them are content videos that explain the grammar, some of them are model videos that will show students how to make vlogs, and some of them are again, content videos for topics so they can explore different meanings. And of course, you've got worksheets for all of these. You've seen the worksheet for the vlog, there's a worksheet for the video. You've also got, and I think the important thing, if you want the students to be autonomous and if you want the students to have some input, you have to have a base of material that allows you to be really flexible. I think it's really important that in the 21st century, we don't have teachers teaching course books. We have teachers using courses or course books to teach students, and there's a difference. So I like a course book or a course book resource that has lots and lots and lots of different things. So I can be very selective and create a course that will work for my students. So the fact that you've got an app for the phone and the fact that you've got a lot of extra resources, and I'd like to show you some of the extra resources we have. So we've just been looking at one unit here of a course book for Focus 3, Unit 1. If we go into life skills, for example, which is part of 21st century learning, we can see that we've got an additional life skill that's attached to Unit 1, and it's about debate skills. So the students would create a debate, they would reflect on how they performed on the debate, and they would be practically using the life skills. So you've got life skills for each unit. Again, I like the photocopyable resources. Let's have a look at some of the photocopyable resources for Unit 1. A lot of them are information gap. They're based on different skills. So here you've got writing an email, and you've got the writing topic, if you notice, that we saw earlier in the writing from the book, which is a friend is visiting your home, and you have an email, and the students have to work together to correct the email. So again, it's an information gap type of thing. Here's a standard information gap. Student A has some pictures, or a picture of a man and a woman that's not quite complete. And of course, student B has the woman and the man is not quite complete. So they have to ask and answer questions about the missing person and draw what their partner says. So a standard information gap activity. We also have, again, we're talking about dynamic and state verbs. You got student A, you got student B. So you're taking the teacher out of the equation. Normally, if you get the students to complete a course book exercise, the students work together, they work through the exercise, and then the teacher checks the answer with them. That means that there's a lot more teacher talking time than perhaps you'd like if you want the students to use the language productively. Here, they don't need to check their answers because they can do the exercise on their own. Student B does his exercises or her exercises on their own, and then they check their answers together because student A has student B's answers and vice versa. So that creates more student speaking time, which I think is great. Again, similar type of thing. We're talking about the present perfect, simple and continuous. You notice that there are 8 pictures. In picture 1, student A has the time period for 40 minutes, and in picture number 2, they don't. Whereas student B hasn't got the time period in number 1, so has to ask, how long have Jim and Sarah been running for to get the answer to complete the gap? And of course, they're practically using, in a controlled practice exercise, the grammar that's been introduced. You can play around with these photocopyable sheets. So I might give the students, this is speaking to describe a picture. I might suddenly throw up on the board something like this and say, where would we put medium height? And the students would have a race, and the first student to type in the number, if we were doing it online, would be a winner. And again, we go through these and we'd find out where they were. So I could do it this way. Or, because I like differentiation, I might provide the weakest students with all the information first, and they would have to match it. But for the strongest students, I might just take away the text and get them to talk about the picture using the prompts. So it's very easy to adapt the photocopyable activities. There are lots of them for each unit. Again, I'm only showing you material from one unit of the book, so you realize how selective you have to be. Students and teachers are pretty keen on assessment. So there's an extensive assessment package. This is just for Unit 1. So you have 2 versions of the test. This is a Unit 1 test, version A and version B. So students aren't going to copy from each other. And again, you have vocabulary tests, grammar tests, use of English tests, 2 versions of each, 2 versions of the writing test. You've also got vocabulary quizzes, grammar quizzes, use of English quizzes, and each of these are sort of, again, 2 versions of each. Everything is connected to the specific learning outcome. Obviously, you wouldn't give all the students all of the tests. They'd hate you forever, I think, if you did that. But this is where selective teaching comes in. So the students that you feel need extra help with grammar would do the grammar test. The students that wanted to have a bit of fun, you could do the use of English quiz. So you've also got a test generator. So if you were feeling that some students had missed some classes and wanted some extra practice, you could give them that as well. You've got lesson plans. Lesson plans are quite useful when you first start working with material, but I find that the more experienced you are, the more flexible you create your own lesson plans. But if you just want to get to grips with the material, each lesson, you're given the interaction phases, you're given the stages of the lesson. So this is the warm-up stage, and it's 6 to 8 minutes. Then you have the practice stage, practice 1, practice 2, practice 3, practice 4, and then production stage. So you've got a very detailed walkthrough for each lesson. And if you have inexperienced teachers or teachers getting to grips with materials for the first time, it's quite nice to have those lesson plans there with contingency plans and everything else. You've also got cultural notes. So I use cultural notes for web quests. So in Unit 1, there was a little bit about the Mona Lisa. I might give them this text and I'll say, see if you can find out on the web what's missing. And they'll go away and then we'll check them the next lesson. You've got online presentation tools with different widgets that I'm sure Yvette is going to talk about. So you've got an awful lot of stuff that you can use with focus, and you can make the lessons a little bit more autonomous. I'm now going to pass you over to Iveta, who's going to show you a little bit about some of the resources we've got. Iveta?
Yes, I'm here, and hello everyone, and thank you very, very much, Phil, for sharing a lot of your experience today with us from your teaching situation at school. And I think you also gave us quite a lot of good ideas what we can implement in the classroom with our students. And we also had this chance for familiarizing ourselves with various activities and how actually we can work using Pearson New Secondary 5-level course Focus second edition, which is approved by the ministry. And in my part, actually, I will focus on digital materials, and I will briefly update you what's new from Pearson. Because we all know that world around is changing, and also educational environment is changing. We don't know yet which scenario will work in the first semester when we are back for next school year, so that we are fully prepared for any situation. We also need to have materials. Either we are in teaching model, which is face-to-face in the classroom, or it's blended or hybrid, as Phil mentioned, or it's fully digital. So, many of you are familiar of Pearson English Portal. But if not, for those who join us for the first time, Pearson English Portal is that particular tool or platform for teaching and learning where you as teachers, you meet your students in one place. And it's very, very useful for teachers because you've got presentation tool there, what Phil was showing you in his presentation. You've got planning and teaching mode available. So practically you can prepare for the lessons and run lesson from the portal. You've got all these teacher resources available. Again, you saw lots of examples. Plus, besides test, what is available in a PDF format, you also have test generator integrated in the platform where you can run online tests for your students. And of course, many of you use online practice or the so-called online workbooks, as you mentioned. So these are kind of things that you are quite familiar, have heard. What is absolutely new, as I mentioned, for next school year, because of this instability all the time, it's active verbs we have developed for your students. So what does it mean, active verb? It's 100% interactive content with integrated video and audio material for students. It can be used in any situation, whether your students are in class remotely or in this blended or hybrid way. For students, you can see the tools available like annotation toolbox, live content assigning. This is how you can also monitor the whole study process. And practically for you as teachers, it allows to create live classroom. And you as teachers will be able to see how students are working with the content, see how well students are doing, even if it's students' book this time, not anymore only workbook. When we come to active books, this is how you can see the lesson, what is available for students. And you can also see all interactive activities are clearly marked so that students are guided throughout, and it's very intuitive work with active book. Students can interact with the content, annotate, write their notes, add any piece of information which is necessary. And if you look from the student's perspective, you can see that activities have very clear design, and it's easy for students to understand how to work with the material. If we speak about benefits for teachers, then you can see that it's all-in-one digital solution for you. First of all, you will have all these assignment sections available just in case the situation repeats and your students are at home and you work with the course book, then you will be able to assign online tasks from the student's book for your students, like homework. What's more, there will be reports available and you will receive automatic feedback on students' progress. As students have several attempts to complete the task, you will see the scores, these attempts, mistakes, errors, everything. And practically, we can speak about virtual classroom available for you as a teacher that will enable you run online lessons with real-time monitoring of students' work. I think this is a great feature and will make your life easier. Also, if we speak about reporting, and when we mention reporting, then you will have this group management and reporting available, and very, very detailed reporting for each assignment and for each exercise for every student in your classroom. So it won't be like giving the task only and waiting. When students complete, you will be able to monitor the whole process. I'm sure you want to get acquainted more with the material. So on our website, you will find information about active books, and all active books will be ready for next school year, which means August 2021. But for those who do not want to wait so long, we will also have demo available. So if you want to explore this new tool earlier, so to receive it, what you have to do is to type in your email address and submit the request for exploring active book. You will get the notification, reply message, and you will be able to go through this demo version. So for all levels of focus, second edition, we will have active books available for next school year. We will also send you the link afterwards where you can request this demo access. And of course, when we speak about materials for teachers, we always want to show that we really care for teachers who use our materials, and we have extra teaching resources prepared for all teachers working with Pearson materials. So when we speak about extra resources, then I'm sure that every user of Focus will be happy having access to our upper secondary academy, which has great extra resources for using in the classroom. So you will find the grammar animations, culture cards about English-speaking countries, real English lessons which focus on culture and communication, pronunciation chart, vocabulary maps, speaking flashcards, irregular verbs activities, and of course we have also added coronavirus videos and worksheets. So lots of extra material which you get as gratis or bonus being a user of Pearson material. I also want to remind you about Pearson a digital library, or it's called ePanel, where you can get access to our books and audio online or offline. And you can also find easy downloadable tests and photocopyable materials, which you can access through our dedicated desktop app. And this is another way how we want to support teachers so that you've got everything what you need for any scenario. What we also want to deliver and promise is that every participant of this particular session will receive afterwards booklet, online booklet to go through how you can teach with Focus online. And what else? I'm sure you also want to see what's inside each level, each particular material we were showing you today. So we've got demo access codes prepared for Focus second edition, and it's up to your choice which level you want to see, and afterwards you will be able to contact Ignace and get access to these demos. And as we promised, we are sure you might have some questions. So this is a time for questions, and we'll try to answer to them.
Thank you, Veta. Thank you, Phil, for a really wonderful presentation. Just like Veta has just told you, don't be afraid, ask questions if you're curious about the contents of Focus second edition. And of course, if you had any questions to Phil, considering the content of his presentation as well. Let's wait for some time. I have gathered some questions before while listening to Phil. And one of the teachers asked, what do you do when students are not motivated? She reacted to the idea that teaching is a great profession when students are motivated. And she agrees with that even when we have to teach online. So Phil, what would be your opinion surrounding the question?
I think there's been a lot of studies done on motivation. One of my favorite books is actually Rebecca Oxford wrote a book about demotivation. And she suggested that a few of the things that we sometimes do automatically as teachers that are really counterproductive is by giving faint praise. So if we've got students that aren't particularly motivated, we give them a very simple task to do, and then we overpraise them afterwards, they actually find that really demotivating. So one of the things that I tend to do is I use a lot of differentiation techniques in my classes. So I might make, if I have a strong student who is always speaking and always the first to speak, if I'm doing a group work activity, that person might be the note taker and not allowed to speak. You know, so I shift it around a little bit. And sometimes I have the strongest students all working together and the weaker students all working together, and I mix it up. And I think the important thing is, if you have certain tasks where you tend to give precedence. So again, I might make something as simple as timing an exercise. I might make one of the students a timekeeper. They don't have to be particularly strong at the language to set a digital timer, but if they're the person who's controlling the activity in some form, it empowers them and it can help engage them and get them involved in the activity. A couple of ideas there.
Thank you, Phil, for sharing your practical knowledge. I am pretty sure that it will be useful to our teachers. And I even found a discussion between two of our teachers who watched your presentation. One of them asked, how can we teach skills without content? And the other one answered, the skills could be taught alongside with the content if we choose appropriate methods. So in other words, what do you think? Which thing is more important, to choose good methods to teach the content, or the content itself alongside with the methods?
So I think what you've got is so for example, we all know that Lithuania has been in the global news recently because of Ryanair flights and various detours. So I would automatically, if I was teaching the present perfect, I would include Ryanair flights. Ryanair have been flying flights from Athens to Vilnius, and I'd ask the students to find out how, and we'd use that content. So I think it's quite easy to shift the topic to make it more engaging, and I'd certainly feel no problems doing that. Bring the language to life whenever you can.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Now, we received a new question just at the moment. Has anyone carried a research what the reasons for students to feel tired are? Is it the teaching to blame?
Well, I can only tell you the research that I've been doing. One of the things that my students have told me is that the information overload is a real concern. So especially when they are given a lot of information online, and there seems to have been a difference between online teaching and face-to-face teaching. Online teaching seems to be bombarding the students with more and more information. Now, it's important to realize that if we just talk about vocabulary, teenage learners are the best equipped to deal with vocabulary, but we should only really be introducing between 7 and 9 new vocab items a lesson. And even with introducing just less than 10, we should be recycling them every 10 minutes. So there's not a lot of space to present lots and lots of new things. I think teachers have perhaps exposed students to too much information, and there's lots of information with focus. You really need to be selective. You wouldn't use everything. You'd use what fits for you and your students.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Phil. And I have a question myself. What do you think? What do you reckon? Which student skills have been affected the most during the pandemic, positively and negatively?
I think let's start with the positive. One of the things that students have been empowered to do is to be able to find information. So in my lesson this morning, we were talking about challenges and I used a picture of a chess player. And one of the students said dismissively, "Chess isn't a sport." And I said, "Yes, but you don't know about chess boxing, do you?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, you just have a look." And he got his phone out and he had a look at chess boxing. And it wasn't distractive to the lesson. He showed the partner he was working with. So I've been really encouraged to use technology. And this is the first week we've been back. I had them all take their phones out and put them on the table. And we've been using a little bit of technology interspersed in the lessons to do web quests and vocab races and those sorts of things. And it hasn't been distractive. It's actually been quite productive. So I think embracing technology has been a positive. In terms of a negative, I feel that the chance to socialize and to practice communicative skills face to face obviously has a lot of the students are quite shy and nervous now, I've noticed. So they need a little bit more encouragement. I took the students out for a walk. There was one kid who wasn't interacting with any of the other students because he'd lost that sort of skill, and it's going to have to come back slowly. So there's a positive and there's a negative.
Obviously, thank you, Phil. I also talked with one of the teachers, and frankly, that teacher is my wife. She said that she sees a big problem in developing and educating communicational skills, like speaking skills during the lessons. Do you see that kind of problem in your school? That, well, it's a bit more difficult to teach speaking skills?
I think one of the things that you have to look at closely is you have to break down education and the educational journey. Let's say we start teaching language at kindergarten. The only thing a kindergarten teacher needs to do is make sure that the student leaves the English class with a smile on their face. And then at primary school, I think you have to expose the students to 30 minutes of target language. So maybe the learning outcome is the kid didn't burst into tears just listening to English for 30 minutes, but could understand some of it. And simple sort of classroom language like, I don't understand, can I go to the toilet, that sort of stuff is introduced. And then when they start secondary, most of the lesson needs to be delivered in English. Now, if I ask any secondary school teacher what the biggest problem is with their students in the first year of secondary, they always say it's primary school teachers. There's not a lot of connection. They should be B1 level, but they're not, you know? And I think one of the things that we have to get the students to understand is that mistakes are portals of discovery. A lot of students are very worried about making mistakes because they've been put in this accuracy-driven environment where every mistake made is a point off their grade. So I sometimes have, especially for first-year students, I have 5 minutes where I actively encourage them to make mistakes. Yeah, and I said, see if you can make mistakes. And every mistake you make in English, I'll give you a point for. And it gets them speaking and gets them feeling comfortable. So you can use different strategies, but they should embrace risk-taking. That's important.
Not being afraid to make a mistake, right? I think that none of us became a professional without making mistakes. So absolutely. I think that's a huge point to mention. Okay, thank you.
And one of the things I do, just to finish, is when I'm giving answers, I deliberately put wrong answers in so that the students who are brave enough at the beginning say, are you sure this is right? And I say, oh, no, it's wrong. So they can see that I'm quite happy to make mistakes, so they can too.
That's an excellent technique, I guess. Thank you, Phil. We also got some questions about the content of Focus Second Edition. So in this case, I will share my email. Also, we will send a newsletter after the event, right, with the information about Focus Second Edition. just the information for the attendees, right? We will send all of you information about Focus second edition components, and you will be also able to mark which level of Focus second edition you might want to try out. So don't worry about that. And the very last thing, would you like to say something to our Lithuanian teachers who are about to start, teaching again face-to-face classes? Just some general recommendations or just simply a wish to our teachers?
I was very pleased to get a haircut before I went back to school. So I suggest if they have an opportunity to get their hair cut so they don't look like some wild woman of the West or something, that's a good idea. But I'd say enjoy it, embrace it. This is what we were trained for. I must admit, I've had more fun this week than I have all year, just seeing the students. And okay, we have to wear masks in the classes. We have to keep the students socially isolated and distanced so they can't mix and match. But just being in a classroom and seeing the students' faces and being able to interact with them on a different level, it means the world. So you enjoy it.
Thank you, Phil.
I want to say, simply for teachers and also for students, you all need to recharge your batteries over the summer. Just simply have proper rest. And because students right now long for being back at school, usually they were tired of going to school. At the moment, longing for being back at school and with friends, use this as a great opportunity. I only want to wish you great summer. And if you are interested in any materials, you have any questions, so as we are cooperating with Shviesas, so let us know, drop us an email, ask us. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you for taking your time out and being here with us today. For both of you, Phil and Yvette, I think that was a wonderful event, and thank you for all of the attendees. Right, I hope that it was very useful for all of you, just like for me. Okay, and
thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. The most important thing is to stay safe, right, these days, and just try to enjoy ourselves, right, enjoying our free time until we can. Thank you.